In fairy tales, just about every hero turns out to be a prince or princess. Even the cats want to be Aristocrats. But fairy tales are always written from outside the castle, imagining what life is like on the inside. Consider the last aristocracy that took root in American soil. In the first 87 years of its existence, the largest single industry in the American Republic was the enslavement of human beings. About 4,000 families, roughly 0.1% of the households in the nation, owned a quarter of the enslaved people, and another 390,000, let's call them the 9.9%, owned the rest. The great political mystery is how they convinced 5 million non-slaveholding white Southerners, along with 20 million Northerners, to aid and abet them in this repugnant enterprise. The slaveholders relied in part on a system that gave them power in the federal government quite disproportionate to their numbers, but they depended even more on the control of news networks, think tanks, and churches. Their messages about states' rights, Christian nationalism, and racial difference were so robust that they continue to serve as the template for much of American political thought to the present. The slaveholding elite discovered early on that dividing the bottom 90% by color was an effective way to keep all the colors working for them. But life was far from enchanted. Economic growth in the South seriously lagged the North. The majority of Southern whites endured punishing levels of poverty, illiteracy, and disease. The elite itself was a profoundly anxious group, riven with fears of insurrection and persecution. In fact, they precipitated the deadly war that led to their own destruction. In aristocracies across the world and throughout history, similar patterns emerge. In the pre-Columbian world of Central and South America, in the France of Louis XVI, in the last days of Tsarist Russia, aristocrats have consolidated their grip on society only to find themselves living in a world of fear. But aristocracies did have their bright spots. Consider the case of the ancient Athenians, who experienced a burst of prosperity, health, and power rarely seen since. Athenian democracy was imperfect, to be sure, but that elite learned to open the doors and expand the circle of freedom. America's first generation of founders, too, were mostly 9.9%ers, and yet they brought forth a new nation, conceived in liberty, dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. The first decades of the 21st century have brought us to a familiar predicament. The 0.1% is back with its old games of dividing and pillaging. Half of the 90% has been enlisted in the oppression of the other half. The 9.9% needs to make a choice. Will we continue to believe in fairy tales about life in the castle? Or will we fight to restore the promise of government of, by, and for the people?